All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over what's called macromolecules. It might be called something different in your lesson, like biomolecules or just organic molecules. But either way, so there's these four chemicals that are in all living things, um, and they're what we call polymers. Okay, that poly means many because they're made up of many smaller subunits. We call those smaller subunits monomers. It's just what it's made of. So, your test, your EOC, it might use the term monomer. It might say subunit. It might just say, what it's made of. But either way, so there's four of them. Um, let's go ahead and get started. And generally, they're just the foods you eat. So every food you eat is going to have some sort of function. It gets converted into something, and then it goes from there. All right. So the first one, carbohydrates. Usually hear terms like, carbs are bad, stay away from carbs. So carbs are needed. You need carbs. Okay. Now, of course, in moderation would be good. So carbs, obviously, things like sugar, starches, breads, all of those. So the reason carbs are important, they give you your immediate energy, your immediate like fuel source. So um, that'll give you the energy you need for like the entire day. Okay. There's other sources of energy too, but this is like the primary one that's going to be used first. Okay. And then it has other functions as well. I'm not going to go into detail on every single little one. So, for example, it makes up the cell wall of a plant. Okay, so the monomer, what carbohydrates are made of, the fancy term for it is called a monosaccharide. So mono means one, saccharide means sugar. And then the carbohydrates are what we call polysaccharides. Poly means many, and saccharide, sugar. So a bunch of monosaccharides are going to make up a specific polysaccharide. So the very common monosaccharide that you're going to read about throughout the entire year, but especially in this lesson, especially when we start talking about plants and photosynthesis, is going to be glucose. So if you can kind of remember the basics of that, um, you should be pretty good. All right, next is lipids. So anytime you see lipids, think fats, oils, waxes. Okay, those are the big ones. So especially fat. So lipids includes fats. Fats, if you have too many carbohydrates, your body doesn't use all the energy, it's going to get converted into fats. Okay, not only that, of course, you can eat fat, and fat has a function as well, other than just stored energy. So if you eat fat, it doesn't just get stored as fat, it has other uses as well. So obviously, the obvious one would be long-term energy storage. So if you use all your carbohydrates up, okay, you don't have that energy source. Your body's going to start burning your stored fat. Okay, and then of course, like I said, has other main functions as well. The other big one would be the cell membrane. So the outside of all cells is what we call a cell membrane. It's made up of a phospholipid bilayer. Um, So we'll learn more about that in another section. But for now, as long as you know lipids make up the outside of the cell wall or cell membrane, you should be pretty good. And then hormones. Okay, it helps make up hormones. Okay, they don't have a true monomer per se, but they are made up of smaller subunits, which would be fatty acids and glycerol. So really easy to remember. If you can remember, lipids includes fats, and then you see fatty acids on an exam, that should tip you off that we're talking about lipids. All right, next proteins. Okay, proteins, you should just think like bones and muscle, all that stuff, which is used for structure and support. Okay, so it's important to get a lot of protein because that's what's going to build your bones and muscles and all that stuff. Okay, and it's also enzymes, it's used for cellular transportation. Enzymes, I'll talk about briefly because there's a whole lesson on it. Um, and then the monomer of a protein. So what proteins are made of, there's several different kinds of proteins, would be amino acids. So usually it's like a couple different combined, and that's going to make a specific protein for various things. All right, so I want to touch on enzymes just in case I don't get to do a video on it later. Um, but an enzyme is a type of catalyst. A catalyst is just a fancy way of saying any substance that speeds up a reaction. So an enzyme is a catalyst for living things. So um, all living things have enzymes for various functions, mainly to break down these macromolecules like proteins into amino acids or carbohydrates into the simple sugars. Um, a banana, for example, is going to ripen because it has an enzyme that breaks down the carbohydrates in the banana into a simple sugar into glucose. That's what causes it to be sweeter. Now, the way it does this is by lowering what's called the active energy. So that's just the energy needed to start a reaction. So if there's less energy needed to start a reaction, the reaction is going to occur quicker. And then the other thing you'll need to know for enzymes that I'm definitely going to ask you about on your DBA and you'll be asked about on your exam are the two main environmental factors that are going to affect how well an enzyme functions. So that would be pH and then temperature. So if you take a banana, put it in the fridge, it's not going to ripen as quick because the enzyme doesn't function as well in the fridge. All right. And last one, which isn't technically a food, although it is technically in all your foods, would be nucleic acids. So there are two nucleic acids, which would be DNA and RNA. That's what the NA stands for. If you ever forget, so Na stands for nucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid, and then ribose nucleic acid. Okay, so the monomer of a nucleic acid, what it's made of, is a nucleotide. Okay, we'll go into more details in a later section on like the specific nucleotides, but for now, as long as you know it's made up of nucleotides, it includes DNA, which stores genetic information, and then RNA, which helps build proteins. So there's that connection between proteins and nucleic acids is RNA. Okay, and then also make sure you know the importance of nucleic acids because they're self-replicating molecules. I'm kind of jumping ahead to early Earth stuff, but self-replicating is really important for the first living things. All right, I'm gonna skip the question. Okay, that is it. Let me go ahead and stop sharing, stop recording.